Hello and welcome to Springboard, your virtual university. My name is Joojo Ocran, welcoming you to Ghana's foremost developmental program and the place where the greatest minds in the world converge. Springboard is brought to you by the Springboard Roadshow Foundation and proudly sponsored by MTN Ghana and the Enterprise Group, with media support from the Multimedia Group and the Daily Graphic. So today is Father's Day, and we join the whole world in appreciating fathers, father figures, and the men in our lives for their dedication, their sacrifice, their example. And so, happy Father's Day to all men listening, watching us across the world. Special appreciation to the President, Father of the Nation, spiritual leaders across the nation, and my own pastor, Mensa Otabil. Happy Father's Day to you. It's instructive that on a day like this we explore untapped opportunities. So today in our discussion we look at Africa, startups in Africa, and lessons learned across the continental landscape about differences in startups, opportunities they can tap, and just what everyone seeking to pioneer a business must know. My guest for today is someone who has co-hosted this program with me at a point in time, someone I've known all their lives, in fact, before he was born. So my guest, incidentally on Father's Day, is my own son, Joojo Ocran. Joojo, good to see you.
It is such a pleasure and honor to be here. And obviously it's special that it's Father's Day, so happy Father's Day, Dad.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It's a blessing. So Joojo works with startups across Africa as Strategic Partnerships Director for Startupbootcamp Afritech, a leading startup accelerator. He's helped founders in Africa to raise over 30 million in venture capital and grant funding. And the focus is on partnerships. And he has worked in these partnerships with key organizations such as IFC, General Electric, and MasterCard Foundation. He's also taught on pitching strategic narrative and fundraising for global institutions, including UNICEF, EcoBank, and Princeton University's Project 55. Prior to joining Startup Bootcamp, Joojo started his career with Everyone on a social impact program, helping disenfranchised communities in the USA to get access to technology. He then transitioned to Deloitte and was privileged to be awarded with the Young Achiever of the Year award, as well as the Africa Excellence Prize for his work, developmental work in Liberia, Sierra Leone, and the Gambia with the United Nations. Joojo, let's talk about how big, how important startups are in Africa's developmental conversation.
Sure. And for me, startups are at the heart of that developmental conversation for two simple reasons: security and opportunity. On the security side, you're looking at a continent by 2050, 1 in every 3 young people across the world will be African, right? On the other hand, 66% of youth in Africa are either unemployed or underemployed. So you have almost a time bomb that is waiting to explode on the security side. Interestingly,
when you mentioned the statistics that you just gave about the numbers projected of Africa's young people in the near future, some mention it as a problem and others as an opportunity. Can these two coexist in one box?
Absolutely, because if you look at it this way, right, the same nuclear material that goes into a nuclear bomb also goes into a nuclear reactor to power nations. So on the opportunity side, if you remember, I said two things: security and opportunity. On the opportunity side, realistically, what we have is the opportunity to have the world's largest labor force. But the only difference between a nuclear bomb and a nuclear reactor is how the material is harnessed. So we have to harness that youth potential, and a big way we do that is jobs. So that's why startups come into the conversation, because a World Bank study showed that for opportunity entrepreneurs, people who aren't running, let's say, subsistence businesses like a cocoa stand or maybe a corner store, for those opportunity entrepreneurs who are looking at how to identify an opportunity and create a scalable solution to address it, they consist of just 6% of all entrepreneurs, but they create 50% of all new job creation across the economy.
Why is the number so low, 6%?
Well, because the truth is, a lot of people start businesses to meet daily needs. It's like, how am I going to feed my family? How am I going to, ensure that the kids have something to eat, go to school? How are we going to live? So the difference between those people who form the vast majority of entrepreneurs and what we like to call the opportunity entrepreneurs or the high growth entrepreneurs is really that vision, that ability to identify a major opportunity in a challenge and be able to develop something that not only addresses it, but addresses it in a scalable manner. That aspect of scalability is so critical.
If you look back 10 years after businesses are formed, which category or which kinds of businesses last and go on to do well? What distinguishes those who do well from those who don't?
You mentioned a 10-year horizon, so I'll come to the 10-year part. But I think if you're looking at the 3-year horizon, which is almost more critical, because if you notice, I think it's about 90% of businesses that fail, new businesses, that fail within the first 3 years. So if you're looking at that early stage, I think one of the biggest differences is, it's simple as desire. It's how badly people want it. And a great example is one of my founders from Nigeria. Her name is Tokbe. And, at that point I was training a cohort of 10 on pitching and, fundraising. We were a day away from a major conference that we've been preparing for all week. And her pitch was ready, right? But she calls me on a Sunday when everybody's relaxing, resting. She says, Joojo, I just feel like there's more. I'm not too satisfied with my pitch. I want to do more. And she leaves her place, comes all the way across town to my house with her co-founder on a Sunday, and we spend the whole day working on her pitch. The next day, she goes on to win one of the biggest pitch competitions in Africa, which is Africa Arena and Africa. So she won 2 pitch competitions on the same day, and that's just because she wanted it more than anyone else and took that extra step out of the cohort of 10 to be the one to come to my house on a Sunday and spend the whole day just refining and working on her pitch to be able to connect with the right investors.
What, in your opinion, are the drivers of desire? Is it genetic? Is it from socialization? Is it some inborn thing that makes one want to do a bit more than everyone else? Where do you think desire emanates from? Of course, it could be spiritual as well, but just from your own perspective.
Sure. I think it's a lot of things. So, for instance, if I take Tokwe, her desire was born out of her own upbringing, where she saw how influential saving was in helping lift her family, where she was in a single parent household, and keep them alive. And so she wanted to give that to other people. So her desire was born out of seeing the impact of that saving and investment culture in her own life and wanting to support people who were in similar situations like her. So that's why she was so hungry. For other people, it's seeing the possibilities of what their lives work could become, of seeing that impact. For some people, it could just be like, look, I know that this is an incredible economic opportunity for me. If I work really hard for 5-10 years, I could be set for life, right? So it really differs. For some people, it's mission. For some people, it is personal conviction. For some people, it's impact. So it really
is there a place of fun?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Let's look at what works and what doesn't work. What would you call the most common mistakes that startups make?
Sure. I think there's a lot of emphasis on competing instead of collaboration. And it was something that was made so clear to me the first time I visited Morocco with the family. And what we saw there was a network. And these weren't, let's say, your typical startup or like high innovation founders. These were people who had built a commerce system around around collaboration. It wasn't about, I'm selling shoes and you're selling bags, so you do your own, I'll do my own. If I went to a store and I said I wanted this shoe or this bag, no matter what the person was selling, they know somebody else, whether it's a cousin, a friend, whatever it is, who was selling what you're looking for. And they would happily go out of their way, to bring you, take you by the hand and take you where, you could find what you're looking for. Because they know that, one, the favor will be returned when the shoe's on the other foot. But also, they know that at the end of the day, we'll come and settle accounts. Somebody will give somebody a tip. And so
it's actually a commission.
Yes, it's a commission.
a very elaborate commission system that runs across the whole country.
Exactly.
But this is something that in Kantamanto, I mean, those days when they used to sell second-hand clothing in those corners, it was there. Why haven't we transitioned that collaborative outlook into the bigger space in a more structured and organized manner like it is done in Morocco? Because there it's very, very, very integral in the way they do business.
There's a cultural element, right? When something is so entrenched in the culture, it becomes easier to execute it in other facets, even if it's not the place where it originated. So for instance, one of the best collaborations that we've got going at the moment does feature a Moroccan startup, right? And they're doing incredibly impactful things by collaborating with startups from Uganda, startups from Senegal, etc. So there's definitely a cultural element, and there's also I almost want to call it an evolutionary element. When there's a feeling that perhaps there's not enough room in the sky, or there's not enough, the pie is not big enough for both of us to share, sometimes there's a tendency to want to compete instead of collaborate, which is a shame, because when you are able to bring complementary strengths together, what happens is you actually make the pie bigger for everyone. So that's what makes it tricky.
So in these conversations about exploring untapped opportunities, I've spoken to MEST Africa and then spoken to Cosmos Innovation. And they both are working with entrepreneurs, young entrepreneurs. And in their models, both of them literally make it compulsory for you to work with other young people, because in the conversations, they make it sound like, listen, rarely would one person have it all. And just working with other people helps test your idea and refine your idea and broaden the scope or the horizon. Would you see a link between collaboration and scalability?
Absolutely. I think for startups in Africa, there is no better way to scale, and I say this categorically, than through partnerships. Because it's easier for me to show you than tell you. If we take the biggest startup on the continent, Flutterwave, it is a startup that is valued at $3 billion in the fintech space. The reason they got so big so fast is by making the right partnerships. They very early days had partnerships developed with Uber, with MTN, with the international, I think it's IATA, which is basically the International Air Traffic Association. When you create these kind of partnerships, when you are processing transactions for these kind of partners, in 2023, I believe they had about $25 billion worth of transactions processed. When you're doing transactions at that volume, you can't do it by going to chase Albert and Joojo. In the grand scheme of things, we are chickens, right? We're small. It is only by chasing the elephants, the whales, those kind of large partners, that just securing one partnership creates massively scalable revenue. That's how you get the numbers that you need to scale. So I think partnerships for African startups, that is the way to go.
If you had, let's say, 25 startups in a room and you had a chance to address them on the importance of scaling, for many of the researches that have been done, like you rightly mentioned, the survival, what do you call them, subsistence entrepreneurs, tend to keep things at that same, revolve around that same size for quite a while. Now, if you had the chance to speak to startups and wanted to stress the importance of scale, what would you tell them?
I'd probably go back to the motivations for starting the startup, right? Whether it is impact, whether it is monetary, whether it is I have a vision and I want to execute it, any of these, right, all of them are enhanced by scale. If you are looking at, financial reward, the more customers you can serve, the more revenue you can bring in, the more the financial reward. Same thing on the impact side, same thing on the vision side. So no matter what your motivation is, being able to develop something that is scalable is inherently advantageous.
Let me take you back to what you do at a startup bootcamp, for the benefit of somebody who's listening and saying, okay, right, that's quite an interesting. And yes, by the way, if you just joined us, this is a Father's Day edition of our conversation about exploring untapped opportunities, and I get to be with my son Joojo as we talk about entrepreneurship across Africa. He's had the privilege of traveling to different countries in Africa as part of his work with Startup Bootcamp. And what we are trying to explore is learnings across the continent. What are startups saying across this continent? Who are the ones getting the big funding opportunities? What do they do right? What can we learn from them to ensure that not just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 success stories, but across the continent is almost like an explosion of startups doing extremely well and scaling to the next level. So if you know somebody who knows somebody who's starting a business, maybe just nudge them to hook onto this conversation and listen to some of the thoughts we are sharing that could be beneficial to them as they move to the next level of their businesses. Joojo, what exactly is the process with, let's say, Startup Bootcamp? What do you do from one end of the value chain to another for purposes of those who are listening?
Sure. So it all starts with selection, like you said. We are looking for ability to solve problems. We are looking for scalability.
Who are you in the first place?
So what we are is an accelerator. We almost, if you will, take startups that have begun the journey, that have got their first customers, that are solving a really important problem, and take them from 1 to 10, 10 to 100. We're not looking to help people start businesses from scratch. What we are looking to do is accelerate and scale, promising entrepreneurs from one level to the next. So that's at the core, that's what we do.
There are several enablers that people look out for. I mean, of course, the biggest one is funding, but just to educate us about the process or the stages. When you select, how long does it normally take and who qualifies? Are there specific countries that qualify? Help us to appreciate.
Sure. So our programs are Pan-African. For context, we usually get about 2,400 applications from across the continent for each cohort. We've been operating since 2017, and we're usually looking for seed, pre-seed, so basically early stage startups that we can help take to the next level. And so while we get all these applications from 52 countries of the continent, we usually only take 10 per cohort. So it's a very, very high touch process. And that's why we're able to get the kind of results that we do, because it's very intensive. It's very tailored towards helping the startups truly actualize their potential.
So when you get the 2,000 applications dumped into your mailbox, let me use that word. Sure. Do you get to meet all 2,000, or you just use a certain criteria to scale down from 2,000 till you actually get to meet individual entrepreneurs? At what point do you start meeting the people in person?
Sure. So it's twofold. There's the scouting process where we're actually finding the startups that make past their 2,000. So there's definitely the virtual component, but they're also fast tracks. Those are what we call national scouting programs. So we will visit different countries. So in the last program, we did fast tracks in Senegal, in Ghana, in South Africa, in Morocco. So we're going all over the continent to meet startups, right? And so we combine those meetings with our virtual funnel, the startups that we may not meet in person, but who also still apply to the program. And then once we have that 2,000, we then start to use our algorithms and our processing software to look out for certain criteria, including obviously the attraction, the revenue, the kind of industries they're in, the problems they're solving, their scalability, etc. And then when we get to about 100, then we start reviewing applications in person, or like people start reviewing applications at that point.
Traction, revenue, problem solving, scalability. I'm repeating them because somebody's watching and listening and saying an impact. Okay, so these are the 5 things that tend to be good pointers for you.
Yeah.
So let's say that you scale down to 10, and finally out of the 10, is it the 10 all, are the 10 all winners in this instance?
So what we do is scale down to 20.
Okay.
And then we bring all 20, we fly all 20 out to the location of the campus. So whether it's our accelerator in Dakar or the one we're running in South Africa at the moment, we then fly the entrepreneurs there, and then we have what we call final selection, where the team and then the partners that we're working with get to meet the startups, and then we're able to pick the final 10.
I'm zooming in now on pitching. I mean, pitching particularly because you had an opportunity to do a pitching training that had people from different countries learning how to pitch. I'm going to come back to Startup Bootcamp, but it would seem that pitching, storytelling has become a huge part of the tools. I didn't want to use the word arsenal for obvious reasons, but just by the way, our home is predominantly a Manchester United home, and Arsenal is not a word we use. Even if that's the only word available, we'll find another word to use. So it's the tools. Pitching has become one of the key tools of leaders. Why is it that all of a sudden, seemingly from nowhere, it's become like if you can't tell a good story, if you can't pitch, your developmental process is stunted?
People buy from people, and if your customers, if your investors can't connect to you, can't connect to your organization and the vision you are trying to sell, it's really hard for them to part with money, whether it's to buy your product or to invest in your company. So what pitching does is it really allows you to connect to them, resonate with them both on an emotional and a logical level. And once you're able to capture attention at those two levels, it makes it a lot easier to then be able to show why you're different from the competition, because at the end of the day you are competing for everything. You're competing for attention, you're competing for eyeballs, you're competing for dollars. So that's what helps you differentiate yourself and be able to stand out and get the investment or the customers that you're looking for.
Reminds me of the famous Aristotle triangle, the logos, the pathos, and the ethos. And the logos being the facts of the raw data, the content that you will pitch. The pathos being the emotional connection that you make, and then the ethos being the credibility, the reputational equity that you bring to the pitching process. In your experience relating to executives and especially in the pitching program, which part of it is a struggle for people?
Pathos, always pathos.
Why?
Because two reasons. One, founders, especially tech founders, tend to be incredibly technically gifted. Right?
So they have the logos. They don't worry about.
They have the logos. They have, I've built my tech. I use AI. I use blockchain. They are so proud of what is essentially their baby. They've spent years and months building it. So they want to tell you every single nitty-gritty detail of the product that they've built. But the truth is, again, people aren't buying your tech, they're buying a solution. So if you're not positioning what you are doing as a solution to their problem, but you're obsessed with the tech or the product itself, you're going to have that problem where people don't connect to what you're trying to do.
Let me bring that into my work as a pastor, my work as a coach. Let the everyday person who leads people speak to people. And you are saying that while you're obsessed with the raw detail of what you are trying to connect to the person with, you must look at what is called, for lack of a better word, the product of the product by the marketing people. The end that the person would get.
Exactly.
Why is that so difficult to contextualize?
If you're a hammer, everything is a nail. If you're a pastor, everything is focused on the scriptures and the word. If you are a banker, everything is about your banking products. So it almost requires you to leave yourself and sit with the other person, look at things from their perspective. And that's why it's so hard, because everybody's self-interested naturally. By human nature is a nature of self-interest. And so if we're taking a biblical example, right, that's why there's so many verses where Jesus is talking about dying to self. Right, because the only way you can be a good marketer is to die to self. It is to look at your business from somebody else's perspective and think about what do I need to do for them? How do I solve a problem for them? Because that even influences how products are developed, how they are designed to make it accessible. And a great example of this is Momo, right? If you are, if a few years ago, there's a lot of focus on apps. There's a lot of focus on what is shiny and new. Momo was the exact opposite approach. It took a technology that had been in existence for decades, right? USSD, which is the most core basic functionality, even the YAM can use it, right? But by focusing on what is available to the largest subset of users and how do we make it valuable for them? How do we make it easy for them to move money? It has become one of the most impactful economic innovations in the last decade or two. If you look at Africa right now in terms of mobile money across the globe, Africa's share of global mobile money is more than 80%. And I don't think people realize just how well we're doing in that space.
Let's come back to this ability to tell the product of the product and the benefits to the person listening, not from the perspective of the business person trying to earn their next buck or expand the front of their business, but the listener, the viewer, the audience whose need the entrepreneur is trying to meet. When you scale down to 20 and you go into pitching, what are the game changers? What do you look out for?
I think the game changers, again, coming back to traction, right? Frankly, it's always, your job is 90% easier when you show up with what you've already done. The vision is beautiful. The vision is compelling, right? And that is what it could be. But when you have two people selling compelling visions, the question then becomes, what have you done about it? What have you done in the past, right? So traction always makes a really big difference, and knowing how to sell your traction, because it's another thing also to have gold and not know how to show people that it's gold. So one, traction. Two, knowing how to position your business is always important. And then obviously then it comes all the way back to that vision. So maybe those three things.
When we come back from the break, let's talk about the culture of a people and how it influences the startups that are birthed in that geographical location, and whether the peculiarities that a culture imposes on you can be broken, and you so can they be broken spiritually or psychologically? But because there are some attitudes that are anti-business, especially when people are very laid back and some general attitudes that prevail in certain cultures are inimical to skill and business. Sure. Let's find out what are the peculiarities of different cultures you've experienced, and even more importantly, if you find yourself in a particular culture that behaves in a particular way, how do you rise above it to do something that goes beyond that jurisdiction to the globe? If you just joined us, this is a conversation with Joojo Ocran, my son, about leveraging opportunities that are untapped in this continent, and we are looking particularly at learnings from startups across Africa. What works and what doesn't work, and how can we just excite the young people of this continent about opportunity and about helping them to be able to build enduring businesses, just so that huge expanse of young people that is growing in this continent can find work to do, and we can solve that huge behemoth of youth unemployment. Springboard is brought to you by the Springboard Roadshow Foundation and proudly sponsored by MTN Ghana and the Enterprise Group, with media support from the Multimedia Group and the Graphic Communications Group. Talking about the Enterprise Group, I have a tip for you for today. How crucial is it to review your insurance coverage regularly? It's just like checking the pressure in your tire. You must check it regularly. And why is that important? Because regular reviews ensure that your coverage aligns with your current needs. Maybe your needs some time ago were smaller than they are today. So checking regularly ensures that your coverage aligns with your needs. Important changes in your life, such as marriage, a new home, a growing family, may require adjustments to your policy. So stay proactive to avoid gaps in your coverage. This is brought to you by the Enterprise Group. The number to call to follow up this is 030-263-4777. The email is info@enterprisegroup.io. Enterprise, your advantage. When we come back from the break, let's talk about culture and let's talk about opportunity. Please don't go away.
Hello? Bye.
Well, everybody's heard about the bird. Bird, bird is the word. Bird is the word. Well, don't you know about the bird? Well, everybody knows that the bird is the word. Bird is the word. Everybody knows about the bird.
To consider the implications. Hello?
Everybody knows that the bird is the word. When the bird,
Whether it's 1924, 2024, or 2124, we've always known that you are driven by your sense of safety and well-being. It is what drives us to see you through from start to finish, from small to big. And in the last 100 years, as you have evolved, so have we also expanded to serve you in many ways. From cradle to grave, with expertise in insurance, life, pensions, properties, health, and for those beautiful memorable goodbyes. It's 2024, and in all our markets, our pedigree is recognized, our strength respected, our expertise valued, and our solutions sought by all who desire an advantage in life. Experience the time-tested and truly trusted 100 years legacy of Ghana's oldest insurer. Take charge of your future now. Insurance, life, pensions, property management, funeral services, health insurance. Enterprise, your advantage.
This be me, Kobe, aka Kobe Boga, KB for short. And this is my sweetheart, Obahima. Today, I get big surprise for her. Charlie, gone are the days I couldn't spoil my girl. Now I'm engaged to the woman of my dreams. Don't just look at my success. To get here, I had to follow the process. Out of nowhere, I lost my job. But I believe in humble beginnings. I got an idea that I knew I could grow. I started from a small setup, then invested in growing my own coconuts. I then grew my product lines. Now, I sell to many supermarkets in the country. Fellow young Ghanaians, trust the process and keep hope alive.
Take advantage of agribusiness through the Ghana Grows program. Ghana Grows, Hope Day.
Be informed, educated, and entertained on Springboard Hangout.
We find time to go to Winneba. I'm actually in Cape Coast.
Here in Tamale, to be specific.
Here in Tishamante. Well-manufactured products that are done here in Ghana.
Join host Comfort Ocran for a journey of discovery and inspiration. This and every Friday at 7 p.m. on Facebook and YouTube. And don't miss the retelecast on ETV on Sundays at 5 p.m.
Welcome back to Springboard, your virtual university, and to this Father's Day conversation with Joojo about startups across Africa and his learnings. Maybe in the second part of the program, we'll get to know a bit about fatherhood and his observations of his father, who is also his pastor. Which one is easier to deal with? But this is just a conversation about how different startups are and what the learnings are about what works and what does not work. Springboard is brought to you by the Springboard Rotary Foundation and proudly sponsored by MTN Ghana and the Enterprise Group, our media partners, the Multimedia Group and the Graphic Communications Group. So before we went for the break, we were looking at pitching, and something just struck me, Joojo. So for a business idea or somebody pitching a business who is good but is not a natural speaker, or maybe even a stammerer, will that be a disadvantage to the business in the pitching competition?
Your confidence in delivery impacts the way they view your competence. So if you struggle to articulate, if you struggle to express ideas in a way that is compelling to people and can connect with them, you're always going to be challenged with how they view you. But there are two opportunities there. Speaking and delivery, it's a learnable skill. While there are people who grow up with natural advantages either by, biology or socialization, it is a learned skill. So there's always an opportunity to improve, but on the other hand, there's also a really important opportunity to partner. Because in the tech space, one of the most common configurations for founding teams is a technical founder and a non-technical founder. There are some companies that obviously only have one founder, right? But a lot of companies we see have a technical founder whose job is, okay, how are we building the product? How are we building the tech? And a non-technical founder who's much more focused on the human side of things. How are we connecting to stakeholders? How are we pitching? How are we selling the vision? So giving and creating those opportunities to partner, I think, is another way to complement the strengths of technical founders with the strengths of people who love to sell, who love to engage people, love to connect, and letting everybody do what they are naturally best at and what they enjoy doing.
So it's also possible in this construct to find somebody within the firm who may not be the founder, but who may be empowered to pitch.
Absolutely.
Right. So the founder, please don't always take the mic. let some brilliant young person do that. We had a fantastic opportunity in pitching for our biggest opportunity as a foundation, that's the Springboard Ratio Foundation. And guess what? On the biggest day of our lives, making that pitch, we chose to have a young person. In this instance, the young person I'm talking to make the pitch for us. And so the person pitching for you is about half your age, thereabouts. And yeah, of course, you wonder whether it would work. What if it doesn't work? But in this instance, it did work. And it's a lesson that sometimes you need to put confidence in other people who are well able to do what you want to do, or who represent a constituency that makes a better emotional connection. In this case, younger people. And that program was also aimed at towards young people. So getting a young person present turned out to be an advantage. So a lesson to all business owners and leaders that sometimes getting other people to do a presentation can be advantageous to you in ways you can't imagine. We're talking about culture. Culture. What are your observations about different cultures and how they influence the startups that are birthed in those countries?
Sure. I think culture is so integral to the type of startups that emerge. I think earlier we were speaking about Morocco as a geography and how it tends to foster collaboration because of the way their commerce system has evolved. And it's the same thing for different cultures around the continent. I think a really fantastic example was one of my startups in Angola called Appy. You know, they were doing a great job. They had, I think, 30,000 customers as of the time we were speaking. 30,000 customers. They covered 30% of Class A pharmacies in Angola, and they were the largest national database of products. But where they were struggling when they came to me was that, you know, we have all this traction, we have so many customers, but we are struggling to convert, you know, access and visibility to sales. We are not making sales. What was happening was that because there's such a low trust culture, people were going to look on the platform to say, okay, I want paracetamol. Paracetamol is available at pharmacy A. But instead of ordering on Appy's platform, they would rather get up, leave the house, and go to the pharmacy and buy it there and then.
Why?
Because, like I was saying, it's a low trust culture. And it's a similar thing across a lot of Africa. If you look, despite our dominance in mobile money, there's still so much left to be done. 90% of African transactions are done in cash. There's still a lot of room for growth. And it's partially because of low trust. So people would rather go and I want to see the medicine feely. If I don't see it, I'm not buying it. And so he was like, Charlie, how do we get them to buy on the app? How do we get them to stop doing this? And I was like, you're asking the wrong question. You are trying to change the way people want to do things. And that is a very tall ask, right? So instead of trying to fight the culture, work with it. So I told him, you know what? You get a commission from the pharmacies whenever people buy things on your platform. So split your commission with the customer, right? Give them a cashback or a discount code that when they go to the pharmacy, they show them your app, they scan it, and then they get cashback or a discount. Because what that does is that maybe you will not get the full 5% commission, but you can get 3%, right? And then you are not fighting the culture, you are working with it. So from that little experiment that we did, he got 10% increase in new customer sales, and more importantly, revenue. It rose by 37% because he was now working with the flow, with people's natural tendencies, with the culture instead of against it.
Is there a possibility that after using recommendations for the app once, twice, thrice, the level of trust will go up. And now the person will be even more confident to say, having built a trust, I can now buy online. Is there a point where that could converge?
Absolutely. That's obviously the long-term behavior you want to encourage. But it's similar to how a baby doesn't get up and start sprinting. It first, it learns to sit up, then it learns to crawl, then it learns to stand before it learns to walk. And then eventually you get to the sprinting stage. But it's in stages.
Okay, so that's the Angolan example. Let's take your own work and your own travels.
Sure.
Working in different countries, which particular culture fascinated you and made you want to stay there and not leave?
I've had a few. I think if you look at my passport, Morocco is probably the dominant one. I think I've been there about 5 times at this point. And it's a fascinating country because it's the convergence of Middle Eastern, African, and European. It sits at the nexus of all three. So you find elements of all of them in a really fascinating country. So that's one of them. I think Kenya as well was another ecosystem that I really enjoyed operating and learning from. So those are probably my top 2 in that order.
Do you find that your career interests are related? Let me take everyone on. At the point you are trying to figure out your life, swing it all the way through Deloitte and then back into startups again. Do you find that you keep returning to where your heart is?
This is my heart's work, truly. Because I always wanted to be in the tech space and in entrepreneurship. I think those are the 2 things that always fascinated me, technology and entrepreneurship.
Why?
I don't know. I think I always loved computers as a kid. I just play around with them for hours, and I've always liked solving problems with technology. And so as far back as I remember, I think I was supposed to go on a summer vacation with, Auntie Janet in the US, and, she ran a daycare, and before I knew it, I was, developing websites for the daycare. I think I was somewhere like 13 or something like that. So I've always loved solving problems with technology. Initially, I thought the only way to do that was by being a coder, by being the technical founder. So it's almost the inverse of the question you asked me, right? I thought the only way to be in tech was to be the technical founder. But then I realized that that's not who I am. I don't enjoy the coding side of things. I don't enjoy that at all. What I love is the aspect of solving problems, connecting with people, selling, stakeholder engagement. That's what comes naturally to me. So once I realized that there was an opportunity to marry the interest in technology with kind of my own socialization with entrepreneurship, kind of watching you and Mom, support and encourage entrepreneurs from across Ghana and the continent all my life, I think that was the natural convergence. So that's why when I say I'm doing my heart's work, I mean it.
Talking about watching Mom and I, one thing that sometimes crosses my mind is when you were growing up, watching me, what was going on through your mind? This guy's a very wicked guy. Tell the public for the first time what was going through your mind watching me growing up. Do you think I was some wicked guy or something?
It was always interesting. I think for me, there was very little divergence between your work and your life. I would wake up sometimes, you wake up during the nights, it's like 4 or 3, and this guy is in the study writing, he's working on his next book. Or, I remember when Combat was in our house at Kaneshi, he's closed, but he's not closed because the work is literally next door. When I say next door, I mean literally you open the door and it's there. It's not even like a different building. So I always found work to be inextricably linked to life in that way. And I think it's also transferred over to me a bit.
But did you hate it then?
Did I think
get a life? Come on, get a life.
I think I've always been, when I was younger, I almost accepted it for who you were. And then as I grew up, I started to realize that not everybody's father is like that. so then I think now, more so then, I'm like, guy, it's closing time.
Yeah.
I'm calling you. Like, I was born first. Like, because it's like sometimes I'm looking for you, and then I know you have all these commitments and obligations, and I'm like, yeah, but it's my father. Like, you people should wait small. Like, let me call him, let me speak to him, and then when I'm finished, then you people can have him. So it's always been interesting just figuring out that balance, right? Of knowing that you have a lot of engagements, a lot of different demands on your time, and then also finding ways to spend time with you and create family time. So I mean, tennis, for instance, is one of the ways that I started to do that, right? That's the only reason I started playing tennis, because I want to spend time with you, but it's really hard to do that. So where do you naturally go? So it's following the culture instead of fighting the culture.
Very important. I see. That's interesting. Let's talk about having a father who's your pastor. How does it? Do you find a dichotomy between the pastor bit and the personal bit, or there's still some confluence? When I'm preaching, what goes into your mind?
It's interesting because so sometimes you're in church and you're tired, and then your eyes want to close and you're like, but I can't close my eyes.
So because the preacher is boring?
No, it's just because you're tired, right? The sermon is great, but it's like at that point you are tired, and it's like, well, I can't. I'm in the second row. If I close my eyes right now and the camera comes, I'm slack. So there's that aspect, but on a more serious note, I think it's fascinating for me because I've watched you walk your journey with God and seen you put your faith in Him over the decades, and seen how year upon year that relationship continues to evolve. You continue to grow in your faith, and for me, that model has always been something that spurred me on in my own journey. And sometimes you'll see things that I'm going through on a personal level, and the advice won't necessarily be personal. It will come from my pastor, right? And then sometimes I can come to you with questions that are more spiritually focused, and because you're also my dad, you can share certain experiences that you've had in the past with similar things that perhaps the typical congregant wouldn't always get to see. So
get the best of both worlds.
Yes.
Let's talk about reinvention.
Sure.
And that will be the last on the personal note, because so for you, watching the various segments of your dad evolve, at one point very steeply involved in business with ministry as the support interest, then the author, then the speaker, then the various segments emerge, and then go full cycle then to developmental work, and then into ministry as the lead now with the developmental work being secondary. Seeing all these phases emerge, does it impact you in any way?
Yeah, I think what it helps me understand is that life is a journey, right? And it also shows me the impact of transferable skills, because while Albert the businessman is different from Albert the speaker, is different from Albert the pastor, is different from Albert the development worker, each of them builds on skills that you have accumulated across that journey, right? So whether that be writing, whether that be public speaking, whether that be one of my favorite skills of yours, which is synthesis, being able to take disparate elements, being able to take, things that are being said in different areas and then kind of amalgamate them in a way that resonates with people, that is easy enough to understand and that people can connect to. All of the elements and facets of you express these things. They just do in a different ratio, in a different, it's almost like you're using the same ingredients for 3 or 4 different cocktails, right? It's the same ingredients, but the ratio of them, the order in which they come, it varies.
Which of these skills do you think you personally have taken up the most?
Oi.
Even if you say so yourself.
It's a tricky one.
I know the answer, but let me ask you.
What would you say?
No, yeah, let me go first.
I'd say communication. Probably communication and synthesis. I think being able to take elements from different places and kind of remix them or present them in a way that's accessible to people or teaching. I think those are...
Be careful what you criticize. You end up doing the same thing. This is Springboard in Virtual University. I'm having a fun time with my son Joojo as we talk about entrepreneurship and startups across Africa, but finding time to also touch on fatherhood in this special Father's Day edition. Let's return to our main conversation and talk about the penchant for people to look for jobs rather than step out to try start a business. All the data is telling us that, listen, the job market can't support the bulging African youth population. So looking for the kind of jobs that were easy to find. I mean, when I got to campus, I was told, for my first degree, I was told that the demand was far more than the supply in the time before I came. It was still relatively close to that stage, but in the times before I went to university, I was told that, listen, on graduation day, there will be blue chip companies, multinationals lining up to hire the best students right there and giving them opportunities. You hear once in a while something like that happen, but the reality is that across board, it's said that the available jobs can in no way meet the need or the demand. How do we get people in bigger numbers to literally migrate towards starting their own business comfortably? It's better now, but how do we scale up on that level?
Sure. And just to buttress what you said, I mean, if we're looking at Ghana specifically, we have about 130,000 graduates coming out every year. And, you already have 1 million people who are unemployed. 1 million youth. That's just the youth. That's not even looking at the full spectrum of people who are experiencing unemployment. So the labor market is choked, right? There aren't enough jobs. And if we're looking at a solution realistically, like you said, if opportunity entrepreneurs are creating 50% of jobs while being just 6% of the total entrepreneurship pool, then it means that is where we need to be focusing our energy in terms of creating the next generation of entrepreneurs. Now, how do we do that? I think there are a few ways to think about it. There is on the demand side, if you will, and then there's the supply side. So on the demand side, we're looking at how do we create more people who want to go into entrepreneurship? How do we, increase the tendency or the interest of young people across the continent in going into entrepreneurship? So part of that is how do we create more role models? How do we show the stories of people who have done this and succeeded? How do we create entrepreneurship education opportunities? Chances for people to go and do internships in high growth startups, learn what that culture is like, right? How do we make entrepreneurship exciting for young people to go into, as opposed to, go and get a stable government job? And I think it starts from our socialization, right? If all you hear in your life is, would you go to school? And, you get a nice government job, you are stable, you are safe. We need to, in our culture, in the way we raise children, help them understand that there are different ways to navigate the world, and that, a government or a corporate job is not the only way. So I think it starts from building that demand side, but also the supply side.
Let me just find your perspective on two things. One of which is in a time where the parent trying to give the child career counseling is not altogether aware of the trend of opportunities, and where, you're traveling around the continent and seeing people do multi-million, multi-billion startup ventures, or ventures that are attracting that kind of funding. Mm-hmm. The parent may not be aware. So in the struggle of the parent trying to counsel or guide the child, as well as the child also trying to look for opportunities and trying to chart their own path, how do you find congruence? How do children navigate it, and how do parents do navigate it from where you sit?
Sure. So I think it all starts with a conversation, and I think I'll use myself as an example.
I knew we were going there.
I remember when I wanted to quit Deloitte, and there was a lot of pushback, I think, from me and mom, and I think there was, and I understood it, Because when I left, I knew that my time was done there. I didn't necessarily know where I was going to go next. I just knew that I wanted to be in the entrepreneurship space. I knew I wanted to be in the technological space. But it started with that conversation and me understanding that from your perspective, a part of it was, hey, this is a role where you're doing really well. You are, your job security is guaranteed. You're going to earn your income. You're going to be stable, right? You're going to be safe, right? And so from that parental perspective of wanting your children to be taken care of, I had to first listen and understand where you were coming from. But I also had to help you understand where I was coming from, which was that, hey, this is what my heart is in, right? And these are the opportunities I see within this space, right? So it wasn't just like, this is an emotional decision, this is what I'm excited about, but it was also helping to shed light on some of the opportunities that I had seen within the space, and being able to clearly demonstrate what the possibilities were, and then be able to help you make that decision in saying that, you've raised me to this point. You have confidence in what you've raised.
I can tell you that there was a bit of faith. It wasn't all logic. There was also faith and prayer backing it. How big is faith in your own personal life and journey?
Oh, it's massive. It's massive. Because, like I was saying, at the time when that decision was made to leave, I didn't have a clear job lined up. It wasn't as if I was moving from one job to the next. It was absolutely a leap of faith where I was saying that, God, I don't think that this leading or this strong sense that my time here is done is for nothing. I'm very confident that you are leading me to the next cycle of my life. So while I don't have a clear next step, I'm going to take this leap of faith. I'm going to trust you that in this landscape where, more than 1 million youth are unemployed, I will leave this really stable job that I'm doing well in, and you will help me land on my feet. You will help me find where I am truly supposed to be.
And so we'll land on our feet in this conversation with these thoughts from Joojo Ocran. If you just joined us along the line, it's a special Father's Day conversation, but really focusing on youth entrepreneurship and inspiring startups across the continent, starting with Ghana as our homeland, great and strong. So we've been learning from Joojo about his observations about culture, his observations about different countries, and very importantly, what entrepreneurs or startups do that work and what does not work. So I hope that you've picked up something that can...
Happy Father's Day to you.
I kept wondering who was opening
Father's Day to you.
Who on earth did that? I was wondering, in the middle of the recording, who was opening the door, and I was trying to say, look, I promise you I won't even tell you.
You did really well.
I did well. I mean, I'm so impressed with myself, trying very hard to concentrate. But thank you very much. Let me stammer if I can. All right. So thank you very much for this. For those on radio who can't see this, my studio has been invaded by Comfort and by Francisca bearing gifts. I promise you, next week is Father's Day. Next 2 weeks is Father's Day. Next 3 weeks is Father's Day. Every week is Father's Day. So if you have a gift, please bring it to the studios and let's do this together. But thank you very much for your thoughtfulness. Thank you, Comfort, for making this happen. Thank you, Francisca, for making this happen. Come closer. All right. Let's do this together. So, on this very nice note, let me thank you all for joining us on Springboard, your virtual university, brought to you by the Springboard Ratio Foundation and proudly sponsored by MTN Ghana and the Enterprise Group with media support from the Multimedia Group and the Graphic Communications Group. A happy Father's Day to every man out there. Enjoy the blessings of the Lord. My guest has been Joojo Ocran with support at the end from Comfort and Francisca. My name is Albert Ocran. See, let's say together. God bless you. God bless you. And God bless you.